Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Rausan Pereira. On behalf of everyone here at Rajya Sabha TV, I'd like to wish all our viewers a very happy Diwali. Well, air pollution in Delhi continued to worsen, causing serious health concerns among residents, even as weather officials warned of further worsening of air quality in the coming days. On Monday, the levels of particulate matter PM10 and PM2.5 in the national capital spiked to hazardous, leaving Delhiites gasping for breath. Particulate matter is a complex mixture that may contain soot, smoke, metals, nitrates, sulfates, dust, water and tire rubber. Fine particulate matter, also known as PM2.5, can enter the lungs and bloodstream. High levels of air pollution can cause a range of health problems, including respiratory ailments, cardiovascular diseases, adverse pregnancy outcomes and even death. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze hazardous air quality in the national capital. Joining me on the program today are R.R. Rashmi, Distinguished Fellow, TERI, Professor C.K. Varshney, Environmentalist, Chetan Chauhan, Deputy National Affairs Editor, The Hindustan Times. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Professor, I'd like to begin the program with you. What is the main cause of such high levels of pollution in the national capital?
I think that burning of fuel is the main cause of this high level of pollution. And this comes from various sources, such as organic matter, left out crop residues, and then the petroleum products which are used in our transportation, cars, buses, and so on, and factories which are really belching out a lot of these fumes as well as thick carbon containing emissions. All these things put together. And secondly, that this time there is a nip in the air. So even an average person tries to really lit a fire sometime late in the evening. And therefore you find that during November, December and around Diwali time. And more than that, there are large number of other factors which are also there. For example, the mining activity and also the road dust and the construction activity adds to the problem in a very, very significant way. So I think the pollution sources are not one, but they are many, and each one is quite potent in contributing to the pollution that we have. And in fact, during the Diwali days, we find that firecracker last year and as in previous years have really played a big role in shooting up the pollution levels. Right. Luckily, this year, because of the Supreme Court directive, so far NCR and Delhi, the firecracker bursting has been banned, and therefore we can hope that the spike may not be as high as we have seen in the previous years, but we have still to see that what really happens, because implementation is a very major challenge.
Absolutely. R.R. Rashmi, measures have been taken under the graded action plan. Despite that, the air quality is hazardous. What's the problem really?
You see, during Diwali time, normally the pollution shoots up, and under the Supreme Court orders, the graded action plan is put in place to check and arrest the pollution levels to a certain extent. But it will work only to a certain extent, obviously, because the fundamental reasons for this pollution do not arise only during this period of the time. The main problems, the sources of pollution in Delhi, as Dr. Varshney has put it, these are the management of the garbage, the burning of the fuels, the vehicular pollution, the construction activities, and the atmosphere, the general the scene around Delhi in terms of movement of people and the type of activity, industrial activities that we perform. These are the main sources. So normally we should, for a scientific solution to the problem, we should carry out an apportionment study, and the expert institutions do carry it out. And the vehicular pollution, for example, that contributes almost 20 to 25%. Construction activities contribute another 20%. The industries which are working in the periphery of Delhi, they contribute another 20%. It is only temporary overshoots in the pollution levels which are caused by seasonal factors like the burning of firecrackers or stubble burning around this time in Haryana and Punjab. So we need definitely to look at the short-term solutions for the stubble burning and the firecrackers, but that is not about. the whole our approach to the problem should be focused on the fundamental causes, which is the vehicular pollution, the construction activities and the industrial activities in Delhi. We need to effectively implement our waste management system, the garbage disposal system within Delhi to be able to address this.
Right. Chetan Chauhan, officials have been speaking about banning entry of private vehicles altogether in the national capital. Measures such as these, do you believe are viable options?
No, I don't think that any sort of such measures will be a viable option, because Delhi itself has a large number of vehicles. Firstly, I think implementation of such a measure will be extremely difficult, because you cannot debar a private vehicle from coming in. We have seen in the past even entry of trucks, implementation, the Supreme Court order entry of trucks have been extremely difficult measure. And it has been implemented now because we have a eastern peripheral expressway and the western peripheral expressway to some extent, but still the trucks enter Delhi because it's a shorter route. So private vehicle, it is extremely difficult to implement. But one, we have to understand that a large amount of pollution in Delhi is because of the localized factors. As Mr. Rashmi said, vehicles, industries, the management of the city, how we clean the city. Every morning, if you see a spike, is almost at the same time when the municipal workers go out for cleaning the roads, which is done totally manually in Delhi, except the main ring roads or the major big roads. Rest, all the roads are done manually, which leads to increase in particulate matter pollution in the morning hours. The dispersal is poor. So the problems, we have to find the problems within Delhi. We have to look for measures which can reduce our road congestion. If you conduct a study today, my personal estimation would be that there is about 50 to 60% increase on vehicle road pressure on roads because of the festival season. People are moving out, the number of vehicles are more, and when the number of vehicles are more, it directly leads to increase in the pollution load. Because of the weather condition, the dispersal is almost nil today. So the pollution has become hazardous. Yesterday, it was much better and cleaner because the wind was blowing and the air pollution was getting swept away. So the local weather conditions are there, it will remain so, you cannot have any sort of a control, but the governments should ensure that the measures are enforced much in advance. The urban air pollution combatant plan, which is there for years now, should be enforced properly. They should be budgeting for air pollution control in the budgets of all the state governments in the NCR region, and it should be ensured that a Supreme Court monitored committee should ensure that the action plan is implemented and people who are not implementing it are held responsible. One of the biggest measures, I think, is that you have to control vehicle registration in the NCR region. People who have one vehicle should not be allowed to register a second vehicle, or if they are allowed, then the premium should be so high that you give some sort of a disincentive for that.
And use that money to improve the standard.
And if you have a third vehicle or something more, in Delhi, every person in many of the places, in the middle class or the middle class, every person has a vehicle. And third, I think the major issue is the public transport. You have to provide a high quality public transport system. The rickety public transport system we have, which is there since 90s, is not a solution.
Right, right. Professor, let's broaden the scope of the debate now and talk about other aspects as well. How do pollutants affect human health?
I think pollutants affect human health in variety of ways. Number one, that the small particles which we call PM2.5, they really are taken by the human beings by in breath, and then they get settled in the lungs, the alveoli. And once they are in the alveoli, then they are really get trapped there and they never come out. So those people who are living in Delhi, their lungs are found to be very dark in color, and this reduces their lung capacity, and therefore the oxygen exchange becomes impeded, and as a consequence it affects health very badly. Secondly, some of these particles are so small that they enter into the bloodstream through the arteries and veins, and then they really move all around the body and create a variety of problems. Particularly those individuals which are breathing fast, such as sportsmen, and more importantly the children and the expectant mother. Now they are under very, very severe stress because of this, And as you have already said, the outcome of such pregnancies are very, very difficult. And it has been said that the mental capacity of the children born in areas where pollution problem is persistent, such as Delhi, for last at least 15 years, we are suffering from air pollution problem non-stop. So under these conditions, the population is suffering en masse, and therefore if the population suffers, I think the cities which are considered as centers of economic activity and for livelihood are really suffering and deteriorating progressively and cumulatively. So I think these are very serious issues which have a long-term implication. Even if we improve air pollution today, I think the effects will continue for a while. And considering this kind of a broad implication, it is very important the air pollution must receive the highest priority, because we cannot afford really to regenerate the health of the people, and particularly the children who are tomorrow going to really take charge of this city as well as the country. So I think healthy people are important, and more than that, the healthy air is important. And one more thing I want to say, that PM2.5 is dangerous, but particles is smaller than PM2.5 is even more dangerous, and we do not measure them. And there are a large number of research reports which say that their effect is far more serious, and therefore it is important that even our measurement system and the kind of pollution that we measure should really also enlarge.
Can we come up with a rough estimate, Professor, as to what this, how many, smaller than PM2.5 particles are out there?
It is very difficult to say, because the composition keeps on varying in terms of the intensity and the quantum of various activities. But the important point is that these particles vary from 0.1 pm to 2.5. So I think they are very, very serious. They are nanoparticles, and very little is really being done in terms of their measurement. But in other countries where air pollution is taken more seriously, such measurements are being taken, and I think the question of health effects are very serious. WHO and others have really pointed out in a big way. There is one more thing that I want to say, that the meteorology also plays a great role in terms of a villian. For example, during the winter days, there is an inversion, which means that the heavy air remains closer to the ground, and therefore anything that we puff out really remains hanging whole night and in early morning. When the sunrise strikes, then the temperature increases, and gradually whatever little diffusion can occur takes place, and therefore you will find that the morning sun is very mellow, and it is not as strong as we find during the summer days. So I think, considering the meteorological condition, there is some kind of a adjustment that we have to make in terms of our industrial activity, as well as in terms of our schooling of the children, and so on and so forth.
That having been said, are evenings better than mornings?
Well, afternoons are better than the mornings.
Okay, so afternoons are the best time of the
best time in pollution level, but that does not mean that they are safe still, because still the background levels are pretty high.
Right. Rashmi, we've spoken about the health aspects of air pollution. Let's talk about the economic cost really as far as air pollution is concerned.
There are several studies. In fact, the World Bank has carried out a study about 2-3 years ago, and recently also they did come out with a study. The numbers can vary, the numbers can run into millions of dollars, but actually what is important is the cost in terms of the health of the human population. The numbers in terms of statistical numbers in terms of dollars are not that important. So the health impacts are very, very severe. We can lose almost a lack of human lives because of the rising pollution levels. In Delhi particularly, where currently the levels of pollution are in the severe category, it can affect very severely the human health and create problems for everyone, including young children and the people in the older age. So what we need to do is first to create a data monitoring system which can really make people aware of what is happening around them. Recently, about in 2014, the government came up with a air quality monitoring index, which was used to predict the level of pollution, and today that is the basis of the graded action plan. Just a few days ago, the early warning system also was put in place, so that people can be told in advance of what is going to be the level of pollution because of various factors, and different technologies are used to measure the pollution level. So these things are being put in place, but the most critical thing which we need to do is to based on this information that is available through various monitoring systems, the satellites, the weather monitoring stations, the pollution monitoring stations installed by the Central Pollution Control Board, we need to have a public policy for managing and addressing pollution, and that actually lies in the realm of the state governments, not just the central government. Central government at best can evolve a policy. Ultimately, the implementation of all these measures lies in the hands of the state governments. Unfortunately, the state pollution control boards and the state governments, the environmental protection is the least of their priorities. In the given scheme of things, they have much more important things to do, for example, fighting poverty, creating educational infrastructure for children, creating jobs for people. These are much more severe the developmental challenges. So unfortunately, the state governments get lost in this, but management of the pollution, management of the environmental problems needs to be given a very focused attention, and the state governments need to apportion a budget for this and effectively create an institutional framework. In Delhi, for example, where this problem is the most acute today, the most important thing which they need to do is to create a waste management system in place, which is effective. And if that is put in place, automatically all the agencies which are involved in managing the waste will also address the pollution in the long term.
All right. Chetan Chauhan, do we need some policy level changes really going forward as to tackle this problem?
No, I think the government has taken the policy level measures like introduction of Bharat Stage 6 fuel from 2020, which has been preponed. Other measures have been taken by the central government. Industries have been closed. There have been norms for thermal power plants, highly polluting cement power plants. So new norms have been introduced. But I agree with Mr. Rashmi that it is an issue of state governments. So state governments have to pull in money, have to enforce plans. The central government can only give a big picture plan and ask the state governments to do certain things which they have to implement. So my concern is the plan is there for the last 10-12 years and the implementation is extremely poor, because in the system nobody is accountable. If the state government is not doing anything, the central government can't do anything. So I think as of now the need of is a Supreme Court monitored committee like EPCA can be given more powers, and they should ensure that the plan is implemented. And if the plan is implemented, it can be reduced to a large level. Policy intervention, I think for the state government, the registration of the vehicles, the industries which are existing, like in Delhi, if you go to the villages in Delhi, there are about 230 villages in Delhi. A large number of unauthorized industries, small scale, are operational there.
Right.
They may be closed as of now, but around the year they are operational. So we need to regulate these industries. Even in the industrial areas, the monitoring of air pollution levels, it is extremely poor.
Right.
Delhi Pollution Control Committee, it's huge manpower. It doesn't have a manpower to implement any of the CPCB or central government norms. So the state governments will have to strengthen their air pollution control mechanisms, monitoring mechanism, implementation mechanisms. But I think the biggest factor is people.
All right.
Until people put up a pressure on the government that you need to do it, nothing will happen.
Right.
So if in the next election, the NCR, in Delhi, in the highly polluted areas, people will ask their candidates, what is your plan to control air pollution? How will you do it? It will make a huge difference.
Absolutely. Let me introduce Palash Mukherjee now, researcher, Center for Science and Environment on the program. Palash, as far as the pollution itself is concerned, do you believe that something needs to be done year round and we can't just wake up in this particular season to try and win this battle?
Very, very true. I think I agree with all my co-panelists. They were talking about two kinds of things. One is on the ground implementation of existing rules and policies and laws that already exist. This is very lax already, and this can be given to the domain of the local governments. So in the case of Delhi, it's the municipal corporations, it's the state government, and also the road owning agencies. So this is implementation of existing laws. This needs to be done on a year-round basis, and not just when the situation comes to an emergency point. But at the same time, there are certain policy aspects which need to be driven from the center, because at certain stages the state can no longer do more than its mandate is limited. For example, let me give you a couple of examples. The power plant standards. The power plant standards is something that India has been grappling with since 2015. 2015 the notification came out, and 2017 December they were due to be implemented. But 2017 October, 2 months before the deadline gets pushed by 7 more years to 2022. Now this displays a lack of priority given to this at the national level. The same thing with the National Clean Air Program. Now this is something that came up at the behest of the Supreme Court, that talks about the creation of air quality action plans for all the non-attainment cities. There are 100 of which, 100 in number. The cities are numbered 100, and they are across the country. They're not just based in the north of India or so on. Even in that, at the draft stage, there was a definite target for pollution reduction. There was a target of 30%, 35%, based on what each city requires. That was removed at a later stage. So to get something like this into effect, what would be needed is the capacity at the state level to understand the intricacies of differences at the city level. A Bombay or a Bangalore or even Allahabad cannot replicate Delhi's plans.
Right.
It does not have the same resources, nor does it have the same problems.
So you need localized city-specific or area-specific plans really going forward, is what you're suggesting.
I want to give one suggestion.
Yes,
that
Chetan.
the next Finance Commission will submit its recommendations. If the Finance Commission gives a incentive that if you reduce air pollution by this much, you will get this much extra devolution of money to the municipal corporations, I think it can be a big factor in reducing air pollution.
Right. Closing comments now from all my guests, starting with you first, Professor. What can the common man do really to battle these high levels of pollution?
I think the common man has to understand that the pollution level is cumulative, because each individual is contributing our might to this problem. And I think we should really economize in using the resources. Wherever possible, we should really walk, which will be good. And at the same time, we should really not use electrical gadgets as much as possible, because whenever we are really depending on them, which are of different kinds, every time pollution takes place somewhere and resources are consumed. And the important thing is that whenever we are disposing our waste, we should be very careful about it. And we should really exert pressure at our local level and our locality level, as well as our municipality level, to really do something. And the most important point is that in the scheme of things that the local governments or the state government has, we do not see any high priority concern for the air pollution. It is only when the problem becomes too heavy, then we are totally dependent, and we feel lot of complacency when we say that now the graded response have come into force. But that is not the solution, because this will continue like this, and even the implementation is very poor. The implementation machinery doesn't exist, simply doesn't exist. And therefore, any policy measure that you initiate, howsoever important it may be and howsoever comprehensive it may be, have no meaning unless it is implemented properly and it is administered properly. So I think that kind of a machinery and setup has to be created, and for that the state governments are not capable, but the center has to provide some kind of a model that how do we monitor the air and present an accurate data to the people for scientists to understand, and also what kind of implementation model should be. Should it be the police, as we have said in terms of patakhas, that the police will be responsible, or should it be some other agency which will take care of it? You see, you have got industry inspectors. Likewise, can we not have air pollution inspectors, so that every locality can be identified where the problem persists and continues to persist? So I think something has to be done on that, and we have to crack as soon as possible on these issues, unless this monster will continue to really take heavy toll on our health and the collective health of the people.
Right. Rashmi, would you agree with that? We need to change the way we think about this particular problem as such. We need to be more proactive rather than reactive.
No doubt. I mean, we rise or we become conscious of this problem only at this time of the year. This is rather unfortunate. This problem is a persistent problem, and it has to be seen in its long-term context. So the solutions cannot be found in a short term, within a month. So my suggestion would be that we have enough of policies and rules and regulations. These are all well-meaning regulations. The issue is that of implementation and strengthening the institutional system which can deliver this objective.
Right.
That lies at the state level, as I was saying. We need to strengthen the hands of the state pollution control boards, and they need to be backed by political will. It is not that the problem of pollution in Delhi is unmanageable or we cannot overcome this problem. The problem persists from year to year, and we become suddenly conscious of this problem only in the month of December. It's November and December only because we lack the political will to implement the existing rules and policies through the pollution control boards in the rest of the year.
Right.
There are industries functioning in Delhi. There are a number of unauthorized vehicles. There are a number of unauthorized construction activities taking place. The waste management authorities do not function. They do not perform their task.
Sure.
These are the key challenges which we need to resolve.
Sure. Polash, as far as the people are concerned, using masks, N95 masks, air purifiers, so on and so forth, use of technology and gadgets, do you believe that that is going to help?
Well, ultimately, these will provide symptomatic relief. They'll provide immediate relief, and they won't address the problem structurally. And these two are accessible by a tiny percentage of the population. Going forward, I think what we need is on two scales. One, I would agree with Professor Varshney that we need to think about our consumption. We need to think, do I really need that second car? Do I really need to take an auto to go down to the local market or go down to the supermarket, or can I just buy something locally? Are my actions responsible for the pollution around me? And secondly, be more aware of your local vicinity. If you see somebody in your neighborhood throwing garbage in that vacant plot right around the corner, point it out. Make sure you know who the local authorities are, and all the rules that need to be enforced are there are vigilant watchdogs locally.
Right.
And the second point is that we need to make more noises about this at the state level or the national level where policy is concerned, because ultimately the environment versus development debate, most of us here sitting here think it is resolved, but it is far from resolved.
Sure.
A lot of the stakeholders are competing directly against each other.
Right. Chetan Chauhan, close the show for us with your concluding remark.
I think all the issues have been covered, but I think one is that the plan at the localized level, because I believe that large amount of pollution in Delhi is because of local factors. So, like in Delhi, if you want to have, you should have a plan for one sector in Dwarka, another sector in Dwarka, Rohini, Malvi Nagar, highly localized plan. Include the local resident welfare institutions in its implementation and monitoring. Totally decentralize the mechanism, how you want to control it, which should include your garbage management, your vehicle management, the parking facility, everything which you can think under the sun, which can control air pollution. So, unless the people are part of the plan, it is very difficult to implement. And one thing which I think is that the Supreme Court will have to be stern, because the problem is getting from bad to worse. The health of the people is getting affected.
Right.
Last thing about children, because Mr. Professor Varshney spoke about it, I think the government should postpone the opening hours for schools, because if you see in the morning 6 to 7, 7:30 is the peak pollution time when
Right.
children go to schools.
Right. All right. On that note, then we'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's it from me. Happy Diwali. See you next time.